Madam Speaker, in my 24 years as a lawyer, I have investigated the affairs of a number of companies, including listed companies, and have authored a few audit and investigation reports myself. It has been my experience that lapses are invariably caused by human failings. You may have good systems in place, but ultimately your systems are only as good as the people who run them. There will always be individuals who ignore or try to get around the rules, sometimes because they're lazy or complacent, sometimes because they're incompetent, and sometimes, unfortunately, because they're dishonest. Almost always, they are not questioned or challenged because of the positions they occupy. And in every case I've been in, losses were suffered. And so the findings in the AGO report are depressingly familiar to me. I have read a number of media and online reports which have portrayed the report's findings as lapses in control, inadequate oversight, or poor management of records. Indeed, there are many such findings in that report, but these understate the gravity of the findings. So I planned to come to this House to make the point that these are serious matters. But then I encountered something quite bizarre. The people I discussed the matter with kept telling me, don't attack the Workers' Party. They will only get more sympathy. Find a way to move on. You have to keep in mind the politics. I could not get my head around that. I really could. Has it really come to this? This is a matter involving public funds. How could anyone in good conscience ignore or downplay what the AGO and the PwC have found? These are not partisan bodies, and Mr. Peng accepts that. Indeed, AGO routinely audits government agencies, does not shirk from highlighting lapses, and members of all parties in this House have rightly scrutinized those lapses and held government to account. So why should the Workers' Party be let off easy just because they are the opposition? And why should their residents be forced to accept anything less than full accountability? This cannot be the right way forward. And sure enough, when Mr. Loh and Ms. Lim spoke yesterday, they tried to downplay the breaches, make excuses for themselves. We are small, we are learning, the system is against us. These are only procedural lapses. That's playing politics. And these excuses are flimsy. Mr. Loh says that unlike the PAP town councils, the WP cannot find a managing agent. Very difficult for them. But the Bishan Toa Payoh Town Council does not have a managing agent. And for the last 19 years, we have been managing the town council ourselves. We employ our own staff, we ensure that they're properly trained, have the proper skills to do their job. We are not perfect, but we consistently score all green ratings in our TCMRs. Our accounts are submitted on time and all the time unqualified. Mr. Loh also had no managing agent when he ran Hougang Town Council, so this issue of a managing agent is a complete red herring. Mr. Chen Shamao, a very experienced corporate lawyer, then suggests the rules on disclosing conflicts are unclear, difficult to apply. But that is not correct. The rules are simple, he must know that. Besides, they have professionals they can turn to for advice. And if the rules are unclear, why is it that the AHPETC is the only TC with difficulties following them? So, Madam Speaker, to me, all these are deflections and distractions. What is more important is what the AGO report actually says. And these findings cannot be brushed off as down to inexperience or lack of resources. This entire episode raises questions about the competence, accountability, integrity of those who run the AHPETC. Minister Shanmugam gave examples yesterday. Some are worth restating. First, the appointment of FMSS, FMSI, and their ownership by the Secretary of the AHPETC and his wife, who is also the General Manager of FMSS, both hardcore Workers' Party members. By any standard of corporate governance, the engagement of FMSS and FMSI involve a conflict of interest. Ms. Lim suggests that FMSS was appointed because CPG did not want to continue as managing agent. But there is still no explanation as to why FMSS was formed 7 days after the election results and before CPG discontinued its services. But that is not all. There is nothing wrong per se with an engagement which involves a potential conflict of interest, provided, and this is critical, provided it is in the best interest of the organization, the conflict is fully and properly declared, disclosed, and the risks are managed. The AGO report makes it clear that all this was not done. The AGO report notes that PwC Consulting did not see any documentary evidence that the AHPETC town councillors had considered the full extent of the conflicts of interest involved and the safeguards needed. And we are still waiting for an explanation why the minutes do not reflect that Mr. Loh and his wife's ownership of FMSS was not declared. Still waiting for that. But that is still not all. We heard examples yesterday of how the Secretary, GM, and DGM routinely issue work orders and approve payments to themselves, effectively to themselves. Mr. Peng says there are oversight committees, but PwC was unable to determine if the chairman and vice chairman of AHPETC adequately verified payments to related parties before they signed the checks. Mr. Peng repeats what Ms. Lim says and says, well, these are recurring payments, and that if we don't pay them, the rubbish will pile high. But again, that's not the point. They keep missing the point. Just because there's a contract doesn't mean you pay blindly. Where is the oversight? In other words, what is the assurance that the very people who are in conflict did not take advantage of their position? And the report makes it quite clear that there was no such assurance. There was no assurance that the services they were being paid for were performed or performed adequately. So, in other words, these people were patting themselves on the back while lining their own pocket. And now they've all ended up in knots. Second, so these are egregious breaches that demand a proper explanation, not excuses. And it cannot be a question of inexperience. Second, was the appointment of FMSS, the party in conflict, in the best interest of the town council? The report says that there was no open competition in FMSS's appointment, and therefore no assurance that AHPETC obtained competitive prices for their services. The report then gives an extraordinary account of how FMSS's fees came to be approved. It states that the AHPETC town councillors were assured that FMSS would charge about the same amount as the previous contractors. But this was false. The report notes that the combined fee of the previous contractors was only about $49,000 a month, and as it turns out, the fees billed by FMSS for the period from October 2011 to June 2012 averaged $67,000 a month, more than 35% higher. In short, their own town councillors were misled. Ms. Lim now says all these were errors, rounding up errors, and so on. But such error is so flagrant that it certainly raises suspicions and warrants a more thorough investigation. What is important to appreciate is that it is not the AGO's remit to determine whether dishonesty was involved. And even if we accept that a mistake had been made at the outset, it is hard to believe that 9 months of overpayment were not discovered. But the worst thing for me in this entire debate, really the worst thing for me, was that Ms. Lim and her team said in response to the AGO report that it confirms that no monies are missing, nor has criminal or dishonest activity been uncovered. Mr. Loh repeated that argument yesterday, and I think is being said ad nauseum in this House. This is a consistent line they are giving this House, and no doubt to their residents as well. But this is blatantly misleading on 2 counts. First, the report says no such thing. In fact, after that statement came out, the AGO responded that Ms. Lim's, and I quote, broad conclusion cannot be derived from AGO's audit. What does the report in fact say? An important element of the cases I mentioned involves piecing together what went wrong and tracing or figuring out where monies have gone to. By and large, this can be done because almost all transactions leave paper trails, and forensic accountants use documents to analyze, reconstruct, and draw a picture of what had happened. But what does the AGO report say about the state of AHPETC's documents? And I quote some portions. At paragraph 5.13, PwC was not provided with sufficient documentary evidence for it to independently ascertain the manner and extent of verification of the payments at the check signing stage by the chairman and vice chairman. Paragraph 5.28, AHPETC did not have a proper system to ensure that documents were properly accounted for and safeguarded. AHPETC was unable to provide supporting documents for the period April to July 2011 to its auditor. Paragraph 5.31, AHPETC also could not provide some documents required during the current audit that concern transactions taking place after AHPETC had taken over from the previous Town Council. So it's nothing to do with the previous Town Council. In response to reminders, AHPETC indicated that it could not locate some of the documents and was still looking for others 3 months after the request for the documents. And then the report concludes at 4.1, I quote, unless the weaknesses are addressed, there can be no assurance that AHPETC's accounts are accurate and reliable, or that public funds are properly spent, accounted for, and managed, unquote. In short, the AGO cannot say if public's monies have all been accounted for, because documents which AHPETC were obliged to keep are missing. So contrary to what Ms. Lim and her colleagues want the public to believe, the AGO report does not by any stretch confirm that no monies are missing or that there's no criminal or dishonest activity. Rather, it says that it does not know because of the way the Town Council has mismanaged its operations. If AHPETC considers this an endorsement, then it speaks volumes about its attitude towards managing public funds. Second, my second problem with that statement, because as Mr. Shanmugam explained, and as any person with any common sense knows, loss does not only occur when money is stolen. There are numerous instances in the report of possible breach of fiduciary duties by AHPETC's officers. We now also know that FMSS was paid far more than other managing agents. We now know that there were substantial overpayments to FMSS which would not have been discovered but for the audit. And we also know that an operating surplus of over 3.2 million has become deficit of over $700,000. That money is not going to come back. And this is something we still have not heard an explanation for. Could there be more examples? We do not know, because the accounts for FY 2013 have not yet been submitted. So while lapses can occur in all organizations, and I accept that, my experience has also shown me that what distinguishes a good organization is its response to discovering these lapses. Failings are acknowledged, systems tightened, losses made good, and those responsible dealt with. So what was AHPETC's response? First, to brush off the many lapses as, I quote, mistakes and omissions due to inadvertence, human error, IT system constraints, a lack of experience dealing with certain scenarios. And then second, to misleadingly spin the report as an endorsement that there was no wrongdoing. It was a blasé response from people charged with handling millions of public funds. They did initially come to this house with a different, more contrite tone. I thought I heard that. And I acknowledge their saying that they will support the motion. But that facade completely fell away when Mr. Pritam Singh said that he will answer to residents who ask him questions during his house visit, and he will not answer the questions posed in this house. Let me ask Mr. Singh this. Does this mean that you will keep silent if no one asks you? How many residents does he think would have read the report, fully digested its contents? How many will have the accounting or legal training to know the full implications of the report and know the right questions to ask? And is your answer going to be, to every question asked, don't worry, AGO said no wrongdoing? So the real question is, how is the WP team going to account to their residents? In fact, not just their residents, should be all Singaporeans, because part of their revenue comes from government grants, which we all contribute to. Make no mistake, if this had been any other company, the directors would have been immediately removed and a receiver appointed to protect these assets. No doubt about it. It has happened many times in the private sector. And I don't think anyone will dispute that. The AGO has explained why it does not know certain things, because it has not shown the documents. Ms. Lim and her colleagues' attempts to play down and rewrite the findings in the AGO report, their attempts really doesn't change the findings themselves, and certainly does not make things right. If Ms. Lim and her team are truly for transparency and accountability, which they say they are, they should help all of us understand what really happened, not obfuscate, deflect, distract. We should not forget that we are dealing with hard-earned public funds, and ultimately the interests and welfare of Singaporeans living in Aljunied, Hougang, and Punggol. They did no wrong, and they deserve better. The answer cannot be same old, business as usual, or I will improve going forward. That cannot be the answer, or at least the complete answer. Most of all, Ms. Lim, Mr. Singh, the entire team, they need to assure this House that no public funds under their care have been lost, misappropriated, or unaccounted for, and that AHPTC has not suffered loss in the real sense and not in the narrow sense they want to use. They have said much in this House, many speakers, all of them have had their say, but they have carefully avoided saying that there's been no loss. And if they can give that assurance that there has been no loss, then they must tell us how they know. How are they able to give that assurance, given the findings in the AGO report, the missing documents, their own auditor's refusal to sign off on the audit, and their own inability to say when the accounts for financial year 2013 will be ready? Despite all their claims that everything is hunky-dory, will be done, they still cannot give a commitment as to when those accounts will be ready. And if they cannot give a complete and satisfactory answer to the highly relevant questions Mr. Shanmugam posed, then something must be done. It is now close to 4 years since they took over. I do not know if there's a statute of limitations for excuses, but they must have long exceeded it. What is the right and only thing to do? Do what any responsible company and board of directors in such a situation will do. For AHPTC to commission a complete forensic investigation and thereafter undertake legal proceedings to recover all losses and damages suffered by it, regardless of who the potential or prospective defendant may be. The WP team should also procure an undertaking from FMSS and FMIS that they will make all their papers and their staff available for that investigation. That is the only way to put this matter to rest. And I really hope, for the sake of the residents, that the result will be that AHPTC has suffered no loss or will be able to recover the loss. That's good for the residents. But we need to do that investigation and find out. But if WP is not willing to do it, then that says everything. Madam Speaker, last year we debated in this House what constructive politics means and how we would like to see our political landscape evolve. The motion reflects an intention and desire to do what is necessary for the good of Singapore and for Singaporeans. But it is not enough for the Workers' Party to simply say they support the motion. If they mean what they say, they must follow through by doing everything they can to ensure that all the questions posed, all the legitimate questions posed, have been answered, and this entire mess is cleaned up once and for all. Thank you.